I thought I was the luckiest man alive. 78 years old, and I'd found love again with a beautiful 26-year-old woman who made me feel young, made me feel like age was just a number, like all those years between us didn't matter. I believed her when she said she loved me for who I was, not what I could give her. I believed a lot of things. The hotel receipt I found in her purse told a different story. A story I think I'd known all along, but couldn't bring myself to face until the evidence was right there in my hands. Norman Caldwell, born 1947 in Boston, retired from a career in commercial real estate in 2012. Married for 43 years to Eleanor until she passed in 2021 from complications with diabetes. We had 3 children together, all grown with families of their own. 2 grandchildren. After Eleanor died, I felt like my life had ended too. We'd built everything together. The house in Newton, the retirement plans, the future we'd imagined with grandchildren and travel and growing old together. When she was gone, the house felt enormous and empty. My kids visited, but they had their own lives. I was just rattling around in that big house full of memories, watching television, eating frozen dinners, waiting to die. My son Marcus suggested I take a trip somewhere warm, get out of Boston. Maybe it would help with the grief. He showed me articles about retirees living in Thailand, said the cost of living was low and the weather was good year-round. I'd never considered Asia before. Eleanor and I had always vacationed in Europe or the Caribbean. But I was open to anything that might make life feel less hollow. I booked a month in Bangkok in February 2024, just to see what it was like. I met Ratchada in my second week there. I was at a coffee shop in the Sukhumvit area, struggling with the menu written in Thai and English both, feeling old and out of place. She was at the next table, working on a laptop, and she noticed me fumbling. She leaned over and asked in perfect English if I needed help ordering. I was grateful. She explained the menu, recommended a drink, and we started talking. She was a student, she said, 26 years old, studying business administration at Assumption University. She worked part-time as a translator for Japanese companies doing business in Thailand. Her English was excellent, her Japanese apparently fluent, and she was learning Mandarin. Smart woman, ambitious, had plans for her future. We talked for 2 hours that first day. She asked about my life, seemed genuinely interested when I talked about my career, my marriage, my children. She told me about her family in Bangkok, her parents, who ran a small restaurant, her younger brother, still in high school. She'd put herself through university, she said, working multiple jobs. It was hard, but she was determined. I admired that. Self-made, not waiting for handouts. We exchanged line contacts before parting. I thought it was just a pleasant conversation with a friendly local. Didn't think anything would come of it. She messaged me the next day, asked how I was enjoying Bangkok, offered to show me around if I wanted a local's perspective. I accepted. Over the next week, she took me to temples and markets and restaurants I never would have found on my own. We'd spend whole days together. She'd translate signs for me, explain customs, make sure I wasn't being overcharged by vendors. She refused money when I offered, said she enjoyed showing her city to someone who appreciated it. She was good company, easy to talk to, made me laugh, made me feel less alone. The romantic aspect developed gradually. Or at least I thought it did. Looking back, it probably developed exactly as she planned it. She started holding my hand when we crossed busy streets, started sitting close to me in restaurants, started messaging me good morning and good night, small escalations that felt natural. By my third week in Bangkok, we'd kissed. She initiated it. We were watching the sunset from a rooftop bar and she just leaned in. I was surprised, but I didn't pull away. It felt good. Better than good. I felt alive again for the first time since Eleanor died. We spent my last week together constantly. She stayed at my hotel most nights. We made love, and it was gentle and sweet, and she made me feel like I wasn't a 78-year-old man with a bad hip and thinning hair. She made me feel desired. When my month ended and I had to return to Boston, she cried at the airport. Said she'd miss me. Said she'd never felt this way about anyone before. I told her I'd come back. Told her maybe I could stay longer next time. She smiled through tears and said she'd love that. I was back in Boston for 2 weeks before I knew I couldn't stay. The house felt even emptier than before. My kids seemed different. Asked what happened in Thailand. I told them I'd met someone. They were concerned. 78-year-old father with a 26-year-old Thai girlfriend. They tried to be supportive, but I could see the worry. My daughter Jennifer asked if I was sure this was real. Asked if maybe this girl was interested in my money. I got defensive. Told her Ratchada wasn't like that. She was educated, had her own career plans, didn't want my money. Jennifer backed off, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. I went back to Bangkok in May 2024. Told Ratchada I wanted to stay for 3 months this time. Maybe longer. She was thrilled. Helped me find a furnished condo to rent in on Nut. Said it would be cheaper and more comfortable than a hotel. The place was nice enough. 1 bedroom, small kitchen, decent view. 12,000 baht a month, about $350. My pension could easily cover it, plus living expenses, with plenty left over. Ratchada stayed with me most nights, but kept her own apartment. Said she needed space for studying and her translation work. I understood. Didn't want to be clingy. Didn't want to be the jealous old man who demanded all her time. Those first few months were wonderful. She'd spend mornings doing schoolwork or meeting with her Japanese clients. Then we'd have lunch together and spend afternoons exploring the city or just relaxing at home. She cooked for me sometimes. Thai dishes, she said her mother taught her. We'd watch movies with Thai subtitles, and she'd translate the jokes I didn't understand. She was patient with me when I tried to learn Thai phrases. Laughed at my terrible pronunciation, but in a kind way. I felt like I had a second chance at happiness. Felt like maybe this really was what it seemed to be. My kids video called regularly. They wanted to meet Ratchada. I arranged a call one evening when she was over. She was charming, polite, answered their questions about her education and career. My son Marcus seemed satisfied. My daughter Jennifer was harder to read. After the call, Jennifer texted me privately. Said Ratchada seemed nice, but asked if I was sure about the age difference. Said people might not understand. I told her I didn't care what people thought. I was happy. Wasn't that what mattered? She said yes, of course. She just wanted me to be careful. I appreciated her concern, but I thought she was worrying over nothing. The first small shift came in July. Ratchada started being less available. She'd have more client meetings, more university obligations. Some weeks I'd only see her 3 or 4 evenings instead of 5 or 6. When I'd suggest doing something together, she'd often say she was too tired or had to study. I understood. She was busy. She had her own life. I couldn't expect her to spend all her time with an old man, but I missed her. The condo felt lonely when she wasn't there. I'd sit watching Thai TV I couldn't understand, waiting for her to message, feeling pathetic about how much I needed her company. In August, she started mentioning money problems. Her translation work wasn't as steady as she'd hoped. University fees were expensive. Her family's restaurant was struggling. Nothing direct. She never asked me for money, just mentioned these things in passing. Of course I offered to help. Gave her 20,000 baht for her tuition. Another 15,000 when she said her father needed emergency dental work. 10,000 here and there for other expenses. She'd always be grateful, always say she'd pay me back. I'd tell her not to worry about it. I was happy to help. I had more than enough for both of us. What was money compared to the happiness she brought me? September brought a new pattern. She started going out with friends more. Girls' nights, she said. Thai women meeting up. I couldn't come because they'd be speaking Thai all night and I'd be bored. Made sense. She needed time with people her own age. But she'd come home late, sometimes not until 2 or 3 in the morning. When I'd wake up and find her coming in, she'd smell like cigarettes and alcohol. She'd apologize, say her friends had wanted to stay out. She'd be tired the next day, sleep until noon. The frequency of these nights increased. Once a week became twice, became 3 times. I started feeling like I was just convenient housing for her between social obligations. October, I started noticing her being protective of her phone. She'd keep it face down, would take it to the bathroom when she showered. If a notification came through while we were together, she'd quickly silence it. When I'd ask who messaged, she'd say it was just a friend or a client. Nothing important. I tried not to think too much about it, tried not to be that suspicious old man. But I'd remembered Jennifer's warning, wondered if maybe I was being naive. Then I'd feel guilty for doubting Ratchada. She'd never given me explicit reason not to trust her. These were just small things, normal things. I was being paranoid. The trip started in November. Business trips, she said. Her translation work sometimes required traveling to meet Japanese clients. She'd be gone for 3 or 4 days at a time. She'd message occasionally, but not frequently. Too busy, she said. I'd sit in the condo alone for those days, feeling the silence, feeling my age. When she'd come back, she'd be affectionate for a day or two, then distant again. The pattern repeated. I started to dread her mentioning upcoming trips, started to associate them with loneliness. In December, I suggested we spend Christmas together, do something special. She said she had to visit her family in Bangkok. They expected her for the holiday. She'd only be gone for 2 days, she said. I offered to come with her, meet her parents. She said no. Her parents were traditional, wouldn't understand her dating a foreign man. Maybe later, when they were more comfortable with the idea. I accepted that explanation, but it stung. We'd been together for almost a year and I still hadn't met her family, hadn't met any of her friends. I existed in this separate compartment of her life, kept away from everything else. She left on December 23rd, said she'd be back on the 26th. I spent Christmas alone in the condo. My kids called from Boston. They were all together at Marcus's house. My grandchildren in the background. I told them I was fine, told them Ratchada was with her family. They asked when I was coming home. I said I didn't know. Maybe not for a while, maybe not at all. Thailand felt like home now. The silence after that call felt heavy. I sat there thinking about Christmases with Eleanor, about how full the house used to be, about how I'd traded that for this. A silent condo in Bangkok waiting for a woman who might not come back. She came back on the 27th, a day late, said there'd been family issues, apologized, brought me a gift, a silk shirt. I wore it and thanked her, and didn't mention how lonely Christmas had been. We had sex that night, and she seemed mechanical, going through motions. I pretended not to notice, pretended everything was fine. Because if I acknowledged something was wrong, I'd have to deal with it, and dealing with it might mean losing her. I'd rather have whatever this was than go back to complete loneliness. January 2025, she started mentioning a Japanese client more frequently. Takeshi. Big account for her, she said. Lots of translation work. Required meeting with him regularly. Sometimes dinners. Sometimes late into the evening. I asked what kind of business he was in. She said import-export. Vague answer. When I asked more questions, she'd get short with me. Say I was being too interested in her work. It wasn't personal curiosity, it was jealousy. That word surprised me. I hadn't thought of myself as jealous. But maybe I was. Maybe that's what this feeling was when she mentioned Takeshi. This tightness in my chest, this anxiety. I didn't bring him up again. February, I decided to look through her things. I'm not proud of it. It violated her privacy. But I needed to know. Needed to confirm or dispel these suspicions that were eating at me. She'd left her purse on the kitchen counter one morning after rushing off to class. Said she'd be back in the afternoon. I stood there looking at that purse for probably 20 minutes, telling myself not to, telling myself to trust her. Finally, I opened it. Inside were the usual things: wallet, makeup, keys, her phone, which was locked. Then I saw a folded paper tucked into one of the inner pockets. I pulled it out. Hotel receipt. The Okura Prestige Bangkok Presidential Suite. 4 nights, January 15 through January 18. Total cost 280,000 baht. About $8,000. The name on the reservation was Takeshi Yamamoto. I sat down at the kitchen table holding that receipt, just staring at it. January 15 through 18. She'd told me she was going back to visit family. Had left for 4 days. 4 days staying in a presidential suite at one of Bangkok's most expensive hotels with this man, with Takeshi, while I'd been sitting in this condo thinking she was with her parents, while I'd been giving her money for tuition and family emergencies, while I'd been believing we had something real. The date at the top of the receipt was February 3rd. She'd been carrying it for weeks. Maybe forgot it was there. Maybe didn't think I'd go through her purse. Or maybe part of her wanted me to find it. Wanted this to end without having to end it herself. I sat there running through scenarios. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe she'd been translating for him and he'd paid for her accommodation. Maybe it was professional. But 4 nights in a presidential suite, that's not professional. That's personal. That's intimate. I heard her key in the lock around 3 in the afternoon. She came in cheerful. Started telling me about her class. I held up the receipt. She stopped mid-sentence. Her face went through several expressions. Surprise. Calculation. Then something like resignation. She didn't try to lie. I'll give her that. You go through my bag? She asked. Who is he? She set down her backpack, sat on the couch. He is client, Japanese businessman. I told you about him. You stayed with him for 4 days. In a presidential suite. In January when you said you were with your family. Yes, just yes. No explanation, no denial. I waited for her to elaborate. She didn't. Just sat there looking at me with something like pity. Are you in a relationship with him? I asked. Is complicated. Complicated how? She sighed. Norman, you are kind man. You help me a lot. I appreciate. But you know this not forever thing, right? You 78. I 26. What we have is nice, but is not serious. The words hit like physical blows. Not serious. After a year. After I'd moved to Thailand for her. After I'd given her thousands of dollars. After I'd introduced her to my children. After I'd let myself believe this was real. Not serious. I thought you loved me, I said. I care about you. You nice to me. Make me happy sometimes. But love? Norman, you old enough to be my grandfather. You think I want to spend my life with old man? I have my future. I need security. Takeshi can give me that. I've given you money, I've supported you. What else do you need? You have pension, comfortable. Takeshi has business, has real money, can set me up properly, can give me future that lasts more than few years before you die. The cruelty of that last sentence took my breath. Before you die, she'd calculated my remaining lifespan, had decided I wasn't a good enough investment because I'd be dead too soon. How long have you been with him? I asked. Since November. He comes to Bangkok every month for business. We spend time together, is good arrangement. Arrangement. That's what I am too. An arrangement? You pay my rent, she said flatly. You give me money. I spend time with you, make you happy, make you feel young. Yes, is arrangement. What do you think it was? I thought it was a relationship. Relationship, she repeated, like the word was foreign. You want relationship? With 26-year-old Thai woman? Norman, be realistic. What we have is business. I give you companionship. You give me money. Same as every old Farang and young Thai girl. You not special. I not special. Is just normal transaction. I wanted to argue. Wanted to say we had something more than that. But every example I thought of had money attached to it. The condo I paid for, the allowance I gave her, the gifts, the dinners, everything had been paid for. Every moment of her time had been purchased. She wasn't wrong. This was a transaction. I'd just deluded myself into thinking it was something else. Why did you even bother with me if you had him? I asked. Takeshi only here 1 week per month. Rest of time I need somewhere to stay. Need money for expenses. You provide that. Is logical. Why have only one when I can have two? Two. Maybe more. I thought about all those nights she'd claimed to be with friends. All those business trips. All that time I'd sat alone waiting for her. How many other men? How many other arrangements? Do you feel anything for me at all? I asked. She considered this. I told you, I care about you. You kind man. Easy to be with. Not demanding. But I not in love with you. I never say I was. You say. I just not correct you. She was right. I'd said I loved her. She'd never said it back. She'd say things like, I care about you, or I'm happy with you, but never I love you. I'd interpreted her non-denial as agreement. Had heard what I wanted to hear. What now? I asked. You want me leave? Did I? Part of me wanted her gone immediately, wanted her out of my life. But another part, the part that was terrified of being alone, wanted her to stay. Wanted to go back to believing the fiction. Wanted to pretend I'd never found that receipt. I don't know, I said. I can stay if you want. Nothing has to change. You still have companionship. I still have place to live. We continue like before. Except now I know the truth. You knew truth before. You just not want to see it. All the signs were there, Norman. You chose to ignore them because you lonely. Because you want to feel young again. Because you want beautiful young woman make you feel special. I give you that feeling. I still can give you that feeling. If you want. She was offering to continue the arrangement. To keep pretending. All I had to do was accept that this was business, not love. Accept my role as client, not boyfriend. Accept that when she left, she'd be with other men, other clients. Could I do that? Could I pay for companionship knowing exactly what it was? I need you to leave, I said. I need time to think. She nodded, stood up, started gathering her things from around the condo. It didn't take long. She'd never fully moved in. Had always kept most of her stuff elsewhere. Within 20 minutes, she was at the door with a bag. You have my number if you change your mind, she said. Then she was gone. I sat in the silent condo, the late afternoon light coming through the window. I felt like I should be crying, should be devastated, but I felt oddly calm, like somewhere deep down I'd known this whole time, known it was too good to be true, known that a beautiful 26-year-old woman wouldn't genuinely fall in love with a 78-year-old man. Known and chosen not to know simultaneously. I thought about Eleanor, about our 43 years together, about how she'd looked at me when we were old, the way she'd hold my hand when we watched television, the way we'd finish each other's sentences. That had been real. That had been built over decades. What I'd had with Ratchada had been built over months and founded on money. Of course it wasn't the same. Of course it wasn't real. I called my son that evening, told him what happened. He was sympathetic, but I could hear the unspoken "I told you so" in his voice. He suggested I come home, come back to Boston. The house was still there. I'd rented it out, but the tenants could leave. My family was in Boston. My real life was there. I told him I'd think about it. Over the next few days, I replayed every moment of the past year, looking for the signs I'd missed. They were everywhere. The way she'd never introduced me to anyone in her life. The way she'd been vague about her schedule. The way she'd accept money without protest. The way she'd never suggested a future together, beyond vague maybes. The way she'd pull away whenever I got too serious. The way she'd been increasingly unavailable. All signs, all obvious, all ignored, because I'd wanted the fantasy more than the reality. The worst part was how predictable my story was. Old Western man, young Thai woman, transaction disguised as relationship. I'd heard these stories dozens of times since coming to Thailand, from other expats, from news articles, from warnings, and I'd thought I was different. Thought my situation was different. Thought she was different. But we weren't. We were exactly the cliché everyone warned about. I'd become a walking stereotype and hadn't even realized it. I stayed in Bangkok for another month. Didn't contact Ratchada. She messaged once asking if I was okay. I didn't respond. I spent my days walking around the city alone, observing other older foreign men with younger Thai women, wondering if they knew, wondering if they were deluding themselves like I had been. Probably they were telling themselves the same stories. My girl is different. Our relationship is real. She loves me for me, not my money. All the comfortable lies. I thought about what she'd said, that I'd known all along, that I'd chosen not to see. Was that true? Had I known? On some level, yes. The suspicions were always there, the doubts, the anxiety. But I'd suppressed them because facing them meant being alone again, meant going back to that empty house in Boston, meant accepting that maybe at 78 years old romantic love was behind me. That seemed unbearable. So I'd constructed this elaborate fantasy where age didn't matter and money wasn't a factor and she genuinely cared for me. Where I was special, but I wasn't special. I was convenient, a reliable source of income and housing between visits from the man she actually wanted to be with. A placeholder, an arrangement. She'd been honest about that in her own way. She'd never promised me forever. She'd never claimed to be in love. She'd kept her life separate from mine. All the boundary-setting behaviors that should have told me this was limited, temporary, transactional. I'd ignored those boundaries and invented my own narrative. I wondered about Takeshi, if he knew about me, if he knew he was one of multiple arrangements. Probably not. Probably he thought he was special too. Thought she spent all her time with him when he visited. Thought the time between visits she was just working and studying and waiting for him. We were both clients being managed, being kept separate, being given just enough attention to keep paying. The thing about being 78 is you're running out of time. Every relationship might be your last. Every companion might be the final person who cares whether you live or die. That desperation makes you vulnerable, Makes you willing to believe things you'd see through at 40 or 50. Makes you tolerate behaviors you'd reject if you had decades ahead instead of years. Ratchada had recognized that desperation in me, had utilized it expertly. I couldn't even be angry at her. She'd just been running a business, meeting market demand. I'd been a willing customer. I returned to Boston in March 2025. The house was as I'd left it. My tenants had kept it well. My kids were relieved to have me back. My grandchildren had grown in the year I'd been gone. Life in Boston resumed its previous shape. Empty but familiar. I rejoined the routines I'd left behind. Morning coffee, newspaper, walks in the park, dinners alone. The same loneliness, but at least here it was honest. No pretending. I still think about Ratchada sometimes. Wonder if she's still with Takeshi, if she's found other arrangements, if she ever thinks about me. Probably not. I was just a job, a phase. One of many clients who passed through her life leaving money behind. I wasn't significant enough to remember. The lessons are obvious. Age gaps that extreme can't be bridged. Relationships founded on financial support aren't real relationships. Young, beautiful women don't fall in love with old men. They fall in love with what old men can provide. Signs should be investigated, not ignored. When something seems too good to be true, it usually is. All obvious. All things I knew intellectually, but had to learn experientially. What surprises me is how little pain I feel now. When Eleanor died, the grief was overwhelming, lasted for years, still hasn't fully gone. But Ratchada's departure felt like waking up from a dream. Disappointing, but not devastating. Maybe because somewhere I'd always known it wasn't real. The grief was pre-processed, already mourned before it officially ended. When she left, I was just confirming what my subconscious had already accepted. I wonder if I could have that year back. Would I do it differently? Would I avoid Ratchada at the coffee shop, keep my distance, stay in Boston? The answer is probably no. That year, even if it was a lie, was better than the emptiness that preceded it. Better to feel something false than nothing real. Better to believe for a while than to never believe at all. Maybe that's pathetic. Maybe that's how people end up in situations like mine. But at 78, you take what you can get, even if what you get is temporary and bought. My daughter asked me recently if I'd consider dating again. Maybe someone age-appropriate, a widow from church, a woman at the senior center. I told her no, I'm done with that. Done pretending I'm looking for partnership when really I'm just trying not to be alone. Done risking my dignity for companionship. Better to be alone and clear-sighted than coupled and deluded. I had my great love with Eleanor. 43 years. Most people don't get that. Chasing another one at this age is foolish. I tried. It failed. Lesson learned. To anyone else in a similar situation, here's what I'd say. If you're significantly older than your Thai girlfriend, and you're supporting her financially, you're not her boyfriend. You're her client. That's not a judgment. That's just reality. The relationship is transactional. She's providing a service, companionship, affection, the girlfriend experience. You're paying for it. The money you give, the rent you cover, the bills you pay. That's
The transaction.
Own it. Understand it. Don't lie to yourself about it being more. If that's okay with you, fine. Some men knowingly enter these arrangements. Pay for companionship with their eyes open. No judgment. But don't do what I did. Don't convince yourself it's love when it's commerce. Don't imagine she's with you because she finds you attractive or interesting or special. She's with you because you pay her. The moment you stop paying, she'll leave. The moment someone who pays more comes along, she'll leave. That's the nature of the transaction. And if you can't accept that, if you need to believe it's real, then get out. Leave. Go home. Find companionship that isn't bought, or accept being alone. Both are better than the self-deception I engaged in. Both are more honest. Both are more dignified. I wasted a year and thousands of dollars learning what I should have known from day one. Don't make my mistake. The hotel receipt sits in my desk drawer now. I kept it. Don't know why. Maybe as a reminder. Maybe as proof that it really happened. That I really was that foolish. Sometimes I take it out and look at it. The Okura Prestige Bangkok. Presidential Suite. 4 nights. 280,000 baht. Every time I see it, I'm grateful I found it when I did. Grateful the delusion ended when it did. It could have gone on for years. Could have bled me dry financially and emotionally. The receipt was mercy, even if it didn't feel like it at the time. I'm back in Boston now, 78 years old, living alone in the house Eleanor and I built together. My kids visit, my grandchildren come over, I have routines and friendships and enough money for comfort. It's not exciting, it's not romantic, but it's real. That's more than I can say for my year in Bangkok. More than I can say for Ratchada. Reality is better than fantasy, even when reality is lonelier. At least you know where you stand. Sometimes late at night I think about messaging her, asking how she is. Maybe suggesting I come back to Bangkok, that I could accept the arrangement for what it was. But I don't, because I know I couldn't. I'd start believing again. Start imagining it was more than business. Start feeling like I mattered to her. Better to feel nothing than to feel something false. I learned that lesson. Finally, at 78 years old. Better late than never. If you're an older man considering a relationship with a much younger Thai woman, ask yourself this. If you stopped giving her money tomorrow, would she stay? If the answer is no, or if you're not sure, then you already know what you need to know. It's a transaction. Maybe that's okay with you. But don't lie to yourself about it. Don't waste time and emotion on pretending. I did. It wasn't worth it. The fantasy was nice while it lasted, but the reality was always there, waiting. Might as well face it early rather than late. That hotel receipt taught me everything I needed to know. She was planning getaways with another man using the stability I provided. That's not betrayal in a traditional sense. That's just efficient resource management. I was providing housing and daily expenses. He was providing luxury and excitement. Together we funded her life. She was smart about it. Strategic. I can respect that even while regretting my participation in it. I learned that love at 78 looks different than it did at 40. Maybe it's not even available anymore. Maybe the window for that closed when Eleanor died. What's available now is companionship, if you're willing to pay for it, or solitude, if you're not. I chose solitude, not because it's better, just because it's honest. And at this age, honesty matters more than comfort, at least to me, at least now.